Story number 1.
The house was old, nestled deep in the woods, where no one ventured unless they had to. It had been abandoned for years, a place spoken about in whispers among the locals. But Daniel didn't believe in rumors. He was a contractor, and to him, the house was just another job, another renovation project for a rich client with more money than sense. When he arrived, the house stood like a forgotten relic, the paint peeling, the windows dark like empty sockets. The wind moaned through the surrounding trees, making the shutters rattle against their rusted hinges. He stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. The air was thick with dust, and something else, something faint, like old rot. Daniel walked through the house, taking notes on what needed to be done. The walls were covered in deep scratches, as if something with sharp claws had tried to escape. The kitchen was the worst. There was an old wooden table, deep grooves dug into its surface. The fridge sat unplugged, its door slightly open. Inside, there were teeth. Not human. Not quite. Daniel slammed the door shut, his pulse quickening. Probably some sick joke left by squatters. He ignored the gnawing feeling in his gut and continued upstairs. The second floor was eerily silent. The bedrooms were mostly empty, except for one. At the end of the hall, a single bed sat in the middle of the room. The sheets were pristine, untouched. On the pillow sat an old yellowed teddy bear, its black button eyes dull, its mouth stitched into a grin too wide. He reached for it. A whisper. He's still here. Daniel spun around, heart hammering. The room was empty. He exhaled sharply. The mind plays tricks in places like this. He told himself it was just the wind slipping through the cracks in the walls. Still, he left the bear where it was. That night, Daniel decided to sleep in his truck outside the house. He wasn't the type to scare easily, but something about the place felt wrong. At around 2 a.m., he woke to a sound, scraping, from inside the house. Daniel sat up, gripping the handle of the knife he kept in his glove compartment. The noise grew louder, long, slow drags of something rough against wood. Then, a knock. Soft, rhythmic, coming from the upstairs window. Daniel's blood turned to ice. The knocking continued, steady, unhurried. Tap! Against the glass, against the window of the room where the bear had been. His hands shook as he reached for his flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness, landing on the window. There was nothing there. The knocking stopped. Then Daniel saw it. On the second floor, peeking just past the edge of the window, not a reflection, something watching. It was pale, too pale, with wide black eyes and no lips, just teeth. Rows of them. The flashlight flickered. Daniel's breath hitched. The thing tilted its head as if curious. Then it grinned. Daniel slammed the truck into drive, tearing out of the property, dirt kicking up behind him. He didn't stop driving, didn't look back. The next morning, he called the client and told them he was done. They could find someone else. He didn't care about the money. They asked him why. He didn't answer. Weeks later, Daniel checked the news. The house had burned down. The fire marshal said it started in the upstairs bedroom, the one with the bear. No one knew how. They found something in the ashes, not a body. Just teeth. Small ones. Human. Story the end.
Story number 2.
The storm came fast, swallowing the road in sheets of rain. Logan gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. His GPS had stopped working miles ago, leaving him to navigate the empty back roads with nothing but his headlights cutting through the downpour. He cursed under his breath. This was supposed to be a simple drive, a quick trip to his uncle's cabin in the woods, but the weather had turned violent and now he was lost. Then he saw it. A motel. It sat on the side of the road, the neon sign flickering weakly. Vacancy. Logan pulled into the lot, the gravel crunching under his tires. The place looked old, like it hadn't been updated in decades. A single lamp flickered above the office door. He stepped inside, shaking the rain from his jacket. The clerk was a middle-aged man, thin with hollow cheeks and tired eyes. His name tag read, Ralph. Room for the night? Logan asked. Ralph nodded slowly. Cash only. Logan dug into his wallet, handed over a couple of bills. Ralph took them without a word and handed him a key. Room 7. Down the hall. The hallway smelled like damp carpet and something faintly metallic. The walls were yellowed with age, the paint peeling. The only sound was the distant hum of the vending machine near the lobby. Logan found his room and pushed inside. It was small, just a bed, a nightstand, and a bathroom with a mirror that was cracked down the middle. He locked the door. The storm howled outside, wind rattling the windows. He kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Then he heard it. A knock. Soft, deliberate, coming from the closet. Logan's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the door. It was slightly ajar, darkness spilling out like ink. Another knock, slow, rhythmic. He swallowed hard, forcing a laugh, probably just the building settling or the wind. Then the door moved. Not much, just an inch. Enough. Logan sat up, every muscle in his body tense. Hello? Silence. The air felt thick, heavy. Then a whisper. The voice was thin, ragged. Logan jumped to his feet, backing toward the door. His fingers fumbled with the lock, twisting it open. Something shifted inside the closet. He bolted. The hallway was empty, the flickering lights buzzing overhead. He ran back to the office, breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Ralph looked up from the desk, expression unreadable. There's someone in my room, Logan gasped. Ralph didn't move, didn't blink. Then he said, Room 7? Logan nodded. Ralph exhaled slowly. That room's been empty for years. No, I heard someone, Logan insisted. Ralph's face darkened. You took his room, he murmured. The storm raged outside, the wind screamed through the cracks in the walls. Then, a knock. From behind Logan. Slow, deliberate, coming from the closet door, the one in the office. Logan turned, heart hammering. The door inched open. Just enough for a hand to slip out. Pale. Fingers too long, nails blackened, grasping, reaching. The last thing Logan heard was Ralph's voice. Soft, almost sad. You should have left. Then the lights went out, and the door opened all the way. Story, the end.
Story number 3.
It was just a job. That's what Sam kept telling himself as he walked up the dirt path leading to the house. He had been cleaning out foreclosed properties for almost 5 years now. Most of them were the same, trashed by angry former owners, filled with rotting food, broken furniture, sometimes even needles. But this one was different. The house had been abandoned for almost 20 years. No one knew much about the previous owners, only that they had left in a hurry, never came back, and never sold it. It sat empty, decaying, untouched, until today. The front door was unlocked, just as the bank had promised. Sam stepped inside, the wooden floors groaning under his weight. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of something stale clung to the walls. He sighed. It was going to be a long day. The living room was eerily intact. No signs of squatters, no graffiti, just old furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts frozen in place. In the kitchen, the fridge sat open, empty except for a single ancient glass jar. The label had faded, the contents thick and black. He shut the door. Upstairs, the hallway stretched into darkness. The light switches didn't work. Typical. The bank had warned him there was no electricity. He pulled out his flashlight and made his way toward the bedrooms. The first room was small, just a twin bed and a rocking chair. The closet door was slightly open. Inside, a few tiny clothes still hung, untouched by time. A nursery, maybe. The second room was bigger, possibly the master bedroom. A large bed sat in the middle, its sheets rumpled as if someone had just gotten up. And then there was the third room. At the end of the hall, the door was shut. Unlike the others, it had 3 deadbolts on the outside. Sam frowned. Why would someone lock a room from the outside? Something about it made his stomach twist. He told himself to ignore it. He wasn't here to solve mysteries, he was here to clean. But his hand was already reaching for the bolts. One by one, they slid open, the metal scraping against the wood. He hesitated before turning the handle. The door creaked open. The air inside was different. Stagnant, thick, with the scent of old wood and something faintly metallic. The room was almost empty, except for a chair in the center, and the scratches. The walls were covered in them, deep gouges in the paint, the drywall torn apart in places. Sam swallowed. The marks weren't random, they were words. Let me out, please. It's still here. His skin prickled. A sound drifted through the house, a soft creak like a footstep. Sam turned sharply, shining his flashlight back into the hallway. Nothing, just the empty rooms, the peeling wallpaper, the silent house. But he wasn't alone. He could feel it. Something watching. He stepped back into the room, his breath uneven. The air felt heavy, and then the door slammed shut. Sam lunged for it, twisting the knob, locked, the deadbolts on the outside. His flashlight flickered, the temperature dropped, then he heard it. Scratching from inside the walls, faint at first, then faster. Closer. His breath came in ragged gasps as he pounded on the door. "Hey, let me out!" The scratching grew frantic, then a whisper. Right behind him, "You shouldn't have opened the door." The flashlight died, the room plunged into darkness, and something moved. Story the end.
Story number 4.
Maggie didn't want to move back home. She was 25, independent, and had spent the last 7 years avoiding this town. But when her mother passed suddenly, she was left with the house, the one she grew up in, the one she swore she'd never return to. It wasn't grief that made her uneasy. It was the house itself. Something had never felt right about it. Even as a child, she had terrible dreams. Dark figures in the hallways, soft knocking at her closet door at night, whispers just outside her window. Her mother always dismissed it, saying it was just her imagination. But Maggie remembered. She remembered waking up to her bedroom door open when she was sure she had locked it. She remembered the feeling of being watched. And she remembered the night she saw the thing in the corner of her room, crouched in the dark, its limbs too long, its head tilted unnaturally. That was the night she started sleeping with the lights on. Now, standing in front of the house again, those memories pressed against her like a weight. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the faint scent of old wood. Everything was as her mother had left it. The furniture, the pictures, the ticking clock on the wall. She told herself she would only stay for a few days, just enough time to pack up her mother's things and sell the place. That night, she lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. Then, a noise. A soft, deliberate tap. Her stomach clenched. It was coming from inside the closet. She sat up slowly, heart hammering. The closet door was shut. Then, tap! She reached for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The thin beam cut through the dark, illuminating the closet door. It was locked. A memory surfaced. Her mother always telling her never to open that closet at night. Never. Maggie squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to ignore it. But then, from behind the door, a whisper, a voice she hadn't heard in years. "Maggie, let me out." Her breath caught in her throat. That voice, it was hers. The voice on the other side of the door sounded just like her. Maggie bolted from the bed, grabbing her keys, her bag, anything she could carry. She didn't care about the house. She didn't care about selling it. She just needed to leave. As she reached the front door, something clicked her, the closet door, slowly creaking open. She didn't look back. She slammed the front door behind her, fumbling with her keys as she ran to her car. As she drove away, she made the mistake of glancing in the rearview mirror. The front door was still open, and something was standing in the doorway. Tall, thin, head tilted, watching, smiling. Story the end.
Story number 5.
Victor had been driving for hours. The highway stretched endlessly, cutting through the empty desert. His gas gauge was running low, and he hadn't seen a station in miles. The only sign of civilization was an old diner up ahead, its neon sign flickering weakly. He pulled in, gravel crunching under his tires. The place looked frozen in time, like something from the 1950s. Inside, a waitress stood behind a counter, lazily wiping down a glass. She barely looked up when he walked in. "Kitchen's closed," she muttered. Victor sighed. "I just need directions. Nearest gas station?" She finally glanced at him. Her eyes were dull, her expression unreadable. "Closest one's about 30 miles back the way you came." Victor's stomach sank. "You're kidding." She shook her head. "No gas out this way." "That can't be right. My GPS said..." The cook appeared from the kitchen, an older man with a stained apron. He wiped his hands on a towel, staring at Victor for a moment before speaking. "How far you come?" Victor hesitated. I don't know. A couple 100 miles? Lost track." The cook exchanged a look with the waitress. "You should leave," he said. Victor frowned. "Excuse me?" The waitress set down the glass she had been cleaning. "It's getting dark. You don't want to be out here at night." Victor forced a laugh. "Look, I just need gas. I'll sleep in my car if I have to, but I'm not driving back 30 miles. The cook's face hardened. "Then don't sleep." Victor stared at them. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" The waitress swallowed. "They come at night." Victor let out a dry chuckle. "Who?" The cook wiped his hands again, his fingers shaking. "Just go. Now. Drive slow, keep your lights off, and whatever you do, don't stop." Victor scoffed. throwing up his hands. This some backwoods ghost story? Look, if you're not going to help me, I'll figure it out myself. He turned and pushed through the door. The night had settled in fast, too fast. The sky, once a dull orange, was now black, no stars, no moon. Victor's skin prickled. His car sat in the lot, the only vehicle for miles. He climbed in, locking the doors. He turned the key. The engine stuttered. His breath hitched. He tried again. The car wouldn't start. Victor cursed under his breath. He reached for his phone. No signal. Then, movement. In the rearview mirror, a figure stood at the edge of the lot. Victor turned, heart pounding. No one was there. The lot was empty, but the feeling didn't leave. That awful, creeping sensation of being watched. His fingers tightened around the wheel. Then, a knock. Soft, slow, right against his window. Victor froze. The knock came again. He turned his head. A hand pressed against the glass. Too long, fingers too thin. Then, a smile. Not a normal smile. A grin stretched too wide. Teeth jagged, yellowed. Inhuman. Victor's body locked up. The thing outside didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then from the darkness, more shapes emerged. Tall, unmoving, grinning, surrounding the car. Victor's chest heaved. His trembling hand moved toward the ignition. He turned the key one last time. The engine roared to life. He didn't think, didn't breathe. He just drove. Out of the lot, onto the empty road. He kept his headlights off. He didn't look back. He didn't stop. Not until the sun rose. Not until the road felt safe again. Only then did he dare to glance in the mirror. The shapes were gone, but in the back seat where no one had been before, a handprint, smudged against the glass. Story, the end.
Story number 6.
The wind howled through the empty streets as David stepped out of the dingy gas station, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. The night was colder than he expected. The attendant had barely looked at him when he paid for gas, just muttering something about getting off the road soon. David chalked it up to small-town weirdness and focused on his GPS. The motel was another 30 miles out. He sighed and got into his car, turning the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. David cursed under his breath. The gas station was the only place for miles, and the thought of being stranded here made his skin crawl. He tried again. The car rumbled but wouldn't turn over. A sharp knock on the window made him jump. A man stood there, grinning. His teeth were yellow, his beard patchy and unkempt. Need some help? The man's voice was rough, like he had spent a lifetime breathing in smoke. David hesitated. Something about the guy made him uneasy. But he was alone and he needed his car working. I guess, he muttered, rolling the window down slightly. The man nodded, stepping back. Pop the hood, I'll take a look. David did as he was told and stepped out. The man peered inside, humming to himself. You're not from around here, are ya? No, David replied, shifting uncomfortably. The man chuckled. Didn't think so. Tourists don't come through here much anymore. David didn't ask why. He just wanted to get moving. The man straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. Try it now. David slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life. Relief flooded through him. Thanks, man, he said, stepping out. The man grinned again. No problem, but... His smile didn't fade. You should get moving. David frowned. Yeah, that's the plan. The man didn't blink. No, I mean now, before she finds you. David's blood ran cold. What? But the man was already walking away, disappearing into the shadows. David didn't wait to find out what he meant. He got in his car and sped off. The road was empty. No streetlights, no houses. Just endless, dark trees. He turned up the radio to push away the unease creeping into his chest. Then he saw her. A woman standing at the side of the road. She wasn't waving for help. She wasn't moving at all. Just standing, watching. David's hands tightened on the wheel as he passed. He caught a glimpse of her in his rearview mirror. Long, dark hair, bare feet, eyes that didn't reflect the headlights. He forced himself to breathe. It was just his imagination. Then he looked at the road ahead. She was there, the same woman, the same empty stare. David's stomach twisted. No one could move that fast. His foot slammed on the gas. The car sped forward, the woman disappearing in the rearview mirror once more. But something was wrong. The air in the car felt thick, heavy, and then a whisper, right behind his ear. Slow down. David's hands jerked the wheel, the car swerving violently. His breath hitched as he glanced in the mirror. She was in the back seat. Her pale face was inches from his. The car spun out, tires screeching. The world flipped, metal crunching, glass shattering. Then silence. Darkness pressed in. David's eyes fluttered open, pain pulsed through his skull. The car was upside down, the windshield cracked. He tried to move. Something shifted in the darkness outside the broken window. Feet, bare, pale feet. The door creaked open. Cold fingers traced his cheek. Then the whisper, closer this time. You should have listened. The last thing David saw was her smile. Story the end.
Story number 7.
The house at the end of Hollow Creek Road had been empty for years. No one in town talked about it anymore, not after what happened to the Mercer family. But when Jason and his friends heard about it, they didn't listen to the warnings. It's just an old house, Jason had said. People make up stories to scare themselves. So they went. It was past midnight when they arrived. The house stood in the moonlight, towering and lifeless. The windows were like dark, empty eyes, and the wooden boards creaked even though there was no wind. Looks like a dump, Eric muttered, shoving his hands into his pockets. You scared? Lisa teased. Of what? Cobwebs? Jason smirked. Come on, let's check it out. The front door was unlocked. It groaned as Jason pushed it open, revealing a dim, dust-filled hallway. The air was thick, stale, almost damp. They stepped inside. The floorboards whined under their weight. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. Broken furniture was scattered across the floor, along with something else, something that crunched under their shoes. Bones. Tiny ones. Lisa swallowed hard. Probably just rats or something. But Jason wasn't listening. He had spotted something down the hallway, a staircase leading into the basement. The door was slightly open, a yawning black void waiting for them. Eric shook his head. Nope, I've seen enough horror movies to know how this ends. Don't be a coward, Jason said. Lisa hesitated. Maybe we should. The basement door slammed shut. All three of them jumped. Then, footsteps. Not theirs. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from behind the door, Jason's breath caught. Hello? No answer. Then a whisper so faint it barely reached their ears. Help me. Lisa's face went pale. We should go. Jason swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. If someone's trapped down there... The doorknob turned. The door creaked open again, revealing only darkness. The whisper came again, more desperate. Help me. Jason took a step forward. Eric grabbed his arm. Don't. This isn't right, but Jason shook him off. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the top of a staircase. Something moved at the bottom, a shadow, shifting. Jason's fingers tightened around his phone. Who's there? The answer came in a voice that didn't sound human. Come down. Lisa whimpered. Eric backed away. Jason hesitated. Then the phone light flickered, just for a second. When it came back on, the shadow at the bottom of the stairs was gone. The door slammed shut again, this time locking. Lisa screamed. Eric pounded on the door. Let us out! The whispering returned, but now it was everywhere, surrounding them, crawling under their skin. Then, laughter. Low, amused. The sound of something moving in the walls. The doorknob twisted, not from the outside, from the inside. Lisa's breath hitched. Oh my God. The door burst open, but the hallway beyond it was no longer the same. The floor was gone. The walls pulsed like they were alive, the wallpaper peeling back to reveal something wet, something breathing, and at the end of the hall something stood waiting. Not a person. Not even close. Jason opened his mouth to scream, but it was too late. The house had them now. Story the end?
Story number 8.
The road was empty, stretching into the dark like a hungry mouth, waiting to swallow anything foolish enough to travel its path. Elliot had been driving for hours, his eyelids heavy, his fingers gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. He hadn't seen another car in nearly an hour, and the vast emptiness of the road made his stomach churn with unease. His phone had lost signal miles back, and the GPS had stopped working, leaving him relying on faded road signs to guide him. Then he saw it, a gas station up ahead. A single flickering neon sign buzzed above the rusting pumps. It looked abandoned, the windows grimy, the structure barely standing. Still, Elliot was running on fumes, and he had no choice. He pulled in, the car's tires crunching on the cracked pavement. There was no attendant, just a small office with a wooden door slightly ajar. The air smelled like dust and something rotten. Hello? Elliot called, stepping inside. The interior was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. A counter sat in the middle, an old cash register covered in dust. Behind it, a man emerged from the shadows. He was tall, gaunt, his face stretched thin over sharp cheekbones. His eyes were small and sunken, but the way they gleamed in the dim light made Elliot's skin crawl. He wore a grease-stained uniform with a name tag that simply read, Hank. "Need gas?" Hank asked, his voice hoarse and dry, like dead leaves rustling in the wind. "Yeah, pump 3, Elliot said, forcing a smile. Hank nodded, reaching under the counter. The register let out a shrill beep as he punched in a few numbers. "Cash only," Hank muttered. Elliot sighed, pulling out a few bills and handing them over. Hank took them with fingers too long, too thin. His nails were yellowed, curling at the edges like brittle paper. "Fill up, quick," Hank said. Elliot turned and walked out, shuddering as the door creaked shut behind him. He hurried to his car, unscrewing the cap and inserting the nozzle. The gas was thick, its odor clinging to the air like decay. As the tank filled, Elliot glanced back toward the station. The door was open just a crack, and he swore he saw something. Someone peering out. The shape was distorted like a face pressed too close against glass. The pump clicked off, and Elliot wasted no time screwing the cap back on. As he climbed into his car, movement caught his eye. Hank was standing by the station window, staring. But there was something wrong. His neck was too long, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, his lips peeled back into a grin far too wide for his face. Elliot jammed his key into the ignition. The car stuttered, coughed. "Come on," he whispered. Hank stepped out onto the pavement. The car roared to life just as Hank moved. Not walked. Moved. 1 second he was by the window, the next he was inches from Elliot's car door. His hands slammed against the glass, long fingers splayed, nails scraping. Elliot screamed, throwing the car into reverse. The tires screeched as he swerved backward, nearly hitting the pump. Hank laughed, the sound sharp and jagged like broken bones grinding together. Elliot threw the car into drive and gunned it down the highway. His hands were shaking. His breathing was uneven. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Hank was gone. For the next hour, the road stretched endlessly, darkness swallowing everything beyond the reach of his headlights. Then the car started chugging. Elliot's heart pounded. No. The gas gauge showed empty, impossible. He had just filled it. The car slowed, then stopped. Silence. Elliot's pulse hammered in his ears as he fumbled for his phone. No signal. He looked outside. The road was still, too still. Then, footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming from behind. Elliot's breath hitched. Slowly, he turned his head. Hank stood in the center of the road, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, things lurked in the darkness. Pale figures with gaping mouths, hollow eyes, skin stretched too tight over bones. They didn't move like people, they twitched, their limbs jerking unnaturally like puppets held by broken strings. Hank took a step forward. "You're empty now," he rasped. Elliot's mind screamed for him to run, but his body refused to move. The figures surged forward, their mouths opening too wide, revealing jagged, broken teeth. The last thing Elliot heard was their laughter, blending into the wind. And then, nothing. Story, the end.